Okay guys, so in this video we're going to be taking a look at how to create 3D VFX in Fusion using a lot of shortcuts. We have this scene here that I filmed on a misty day, so this is the shot as it was shot. So you can see we have some misty background mountains there, and we have some cars, we have some people walking, and we have this couple taking a nice little stroll there. And we have this sewer lid, or I know they are called manholes, but I just find the term to be kind of disgusting. For these kinds of stuff, Fusion is severely underrated. To learn more about Fusion and see what Fusion can do, and if you like me presenting those facts to you, consider subscribing on Patreon. It would help me out greatly. So first things first, I camera tracked the shot. Quite simply like this. I tracked this light post, here. I tracked that, just one simple tracker, to essentially create a mask where the couple is walking, so that when we are tracking, we have a mask essentially telling us not to track their movement. So you can see the trackers are ignoring the cars driving here and the couple walking. This mask is just piped into the camera tracker in the white input, and then the camera, I feel like Fusion is more often than not good enough at figuring out the focal length of the scene, and I find trying to force it manually actually kind of complicates the process a lot more than it has to. So yeah, refine focal length on by default. I have 486 tracks here, and the average solve error is 0.4 pixels, which is more than good enough for this shot. So I camera tracked the scene. And then in Blender, what I did was that I created this cylinder shape in Blender that I simulated with a rigid body against the, let me just show the ground as well. I created this scene here in Blender. I've just imported it into Fusion via FBX. So, and you can see this is the simulation. I decided not to render this out from Blender and just import these shapes, their animations, into Fusion, and then place them in our scene that I created. So what I did to recreate the scene in Fusion was I created this projection setup. So I piped the footage and the ground plane. The ground plane I got from the camera tracker. So let me just show you that as well. If you see here, so we have this 3D scene from the tracker, and we have this image plane that is using a catcher material to essentially project the ground that is being piped into this camera that also goes into the merged 3D. And then we are rendering out the scene here with the hardware UV renderer. So we are rendering out this, and then that is being fed right into a time speed node that is freezing the frame on frame 0. So that gives us just this image here. So this time speed here is being transformed a little bit, and we are essentially transforming it to just include the manhole. We are creating a create bump map. We are essentially piping these very, very rough images into a cook torrents node that will work as a form of material for our lid here. So you can see it's not perfect, quite crude, but what we're doing is we're using a UV map, like so. Could probably be improved if you had some photography on the location closer to the manhole. Like I'm just using this texture here, right? So anyways, if we go back to the projected scene being piped into the frozen frame here, now we're also recreating our scene in 2.5D. So we are masking out just with a merge node and a mask node. We are with the operator mask just masking out the lid itself, and we are making a bump map of this like so, and we are piping the same ground plane now into this replaced material, which essentially says we're taking this material and we are replacing it with this material. So now our hole here is transparent. So now we have our ground and we have our lid, right? However, if we remove the lid and we view this through the renderer, you can see we have just, you know, a hole. So what I also did was that I took this texture, this here, and I applied it on this cylinder shape. Did some UV mapping to not stretch the textures too much. Did a few rotations. And then in this 2.5D recreation of our scene here, just pipe that in. And now you can see we have a little bit of a, what do you call it? Not a tunnel, but a sort of a passageway. You see, like we have this thing here. And now if we pipe that into ambient occlusion, we're getting ambient occlusion as well. So if we pipe the lid back in to our scene, let's just pipe that back in. So there we go. So now, since we UV mapped it on frame 0, we also hit lock UVs on animated objects. If we uncheck this and play the animation, you can see that the texture is moving on the mesh, but since we clicked lock UVs on animated objects, the texture actually sticks to it. So if we go back to this scene here, we now have a 3D recreation of our scene. So this is how it looks like in the render right now. So you can see it's not very, I mean, we got something interesting going on here. We're also adding ambient occlusion to this, and that does a lot. So you can see we're getting some shadows on the ground there. You might notice that we are getting some really nasty anti-aliasing here, but that's just all temporary because we are right now in a 4K resolution, but we're scaling that down after to essentially filter out the anti-aliasing. So now we have shadow, but it's kind of flat, and we are also having kind of a explosion here, right? So it should affect the scene lighting wise. So what we're also doing is we are essentially piping all of this into a different 3D scene. This is essentially the same scene, right? But here we are adding lights to it. And we're also increasing the ground a little bit by taking a bigger projection. We're just projecting a bigger area, and then we are rendering it out like this. And we're essentially doing the same Cook Torrance replace material workflow as we did to our ground. So we did the exact same thing here for the bigger ground. Just it's a little bit lower resolution because it's a bigger, right? This one is just to catch the lighting. So if you now view this through the renderer, you can see I also added this point light here, which is the light that is coming from the explosion. So this scene is going into the renderer 3D, and I also added a second renderer here with just the vector pass, and this one is set to software renderer. Because I found, I don't know if this is just for my PC or if it's a Fusion problem in general, but when I'm using a renderer 3D set to hardware render, and I am rendering any of these channels in addition to the vector channel, I often get issues when trying to render the scene out. The fix for that is essentially to create a second renderer 3D, disable, the regular channels, all the channels, and just have that single one for the vector pass. Because this one is being rendered on the GPU, and then this one is being rendered on the CPU. So we have our projected scene with only the projections. We apply ambient occlusion to that, and then we take our light pass and we just do some modifications to the alpha gain to where we are getting the lighting information, and we're also animating the blend to essentially appear when the gas explosion is happening. Around frame 40 to 41, we're getting it's just turning on, and then when we land again, we have 2 keyframes here that is turning it off. And then we're also applying motion blur with this render 3D here. Now, after that, to get rid of the anti-aliasing that you'll see, let me just go to a frame where the anti-aliasing is visible. So you can see we're currently in a 4K timeline, and now I'm resizing it down to the resolution of our plate, which is essentially 2K. So, and we snapped, but now you can see the aliasing is much nicer. And then we're just simply adding that on top of our footage. There is a small artifact, but you won't notice it when it's playing. So that's the background. Oh, I almost forgot. In the final scene, so we have this couple here that is taking a stroll along the waterfront, or the pond that's behind there. And they were just walking, and you have this huge explosion happening, and they wouldn't be reacting. So I had them removed. So to remove them, I just did it the fastest and dirtiest way possible. I took a time speed with a freeze frame, when this area was when they were over here, and I did a freeze frame when they were over there, and I just composited them out like so. I made a mask with some feathering on, and I did the lamp post track. Why the lamp post, you might ask? Because we are tilting up heavily, and the lamp post is still in frame, so it's getting roughly the same position. Like you can see, it is over here, but they are over there, but like it's almost on the same plane, and frankly it is doing a really solid enough job. Oh, and of course, since we are essentially just overlaying a freeze frame, in the tracker settings I also enabled motion blur, because otherwise, you know, we would have no motion blur on the scene there. Enable motion blur, and it's blending, right? So I also set the motion blur settings to 10. With this camera tracker, I also exported it to Blender. So in Blender we have the rigid body simulation, we have a cylinder that essentially reflects the ground, and I created it to be this thick to keep the flame behaving in a desired manner. We have this emitter object. I have this emitter object that is essentially pushing out. The settings of the smoke domain is 256, but I added a noise modifier to it to essentially scale it up a little bit. So this is just a straight up normal fire sim from Blender with principal volume, and I just increased the black body intensity. That's essentially all I did to it. So by default it's just like that, and then I put it to 50. And then I of course got the track from Fusion into Blender, so I just rendered it through the camera, and then everything is set to transparent. And the only render I did in Blender is this flame here, because I couldn't do it in Fusion, let's be honest. So yeah, in Fusion we have this EXR sequence here. So this is how that looks like, coming straight out of Blender. So it's not too bad actually. Blender is getting kind of good. It's good enough for me, I don't know. So yeah, that's fantastic. We also have the, I forgot to tell you, but the lid, the manhole lid, this one that is flying, was also set up to be a fluid emitter effector. So you can see the movement of the lid flying through the smoke. It's you can see something is happening here where it's being affected, so that's nice. I forgot when I was rendering it, I forgot to check motion blur for the render from Blender, so that is on me. So I just ended up using a optical flow motion blur on it, and you know, it's not optimal, but it's okay for this. And then we are piping it in twice. So first of all, we are piping it into a color corrector. This one is mainly just for the smoke. You can see the fire there, of course, too, but it's I'm overlaying the fire in a separate thing. So you can see this is how that looks. And then we have it branching off, and it's going into an isolation of the fire. So yeah, I should also mention I rendered this out as a multi-layer EXR. So we have combined vector. However, this vector layer, I forgot to add this vector layer. I can't display the vector, and nothing is happening in the frame. So I will have to look into that more. But we have volume. We have volume direct. We have volume indirect. Hard to see with a black background, of course. And then we have emission and noisy image. Here we have the base image essentially being color graded like so. And then here we have a isolation of the fire. So this one I'm just using the layer emission. I'm color correcting that a little bit down. So the final shot is looking, let me just pipe this into the LUT file or the color grading as well. So that's just to get the highlights back. I should also mention that when we are combining two separate sources together, I'm also using some color space transforms here. And the flames are going in here. But before that, I'm converting this scene, this node, into linear. So that would be input color space. I set that to Rec 2020, Fujifilm F-Log, and then output color space, Rec 2020, and then linear. And here we are combining these two together, and then we're converting them back from Rec 2020 linear to Rec 2020 Fujifilm F-Log. And then we are doing the color grade after that. However, I might just realize I have forgotten to do a slight conversion here. So for this one, Let's just add a color space transform to this real quick. You see, this one here was rendered from Blender in Rec 709 and linear. So in these merge nodes here, we are actually combining Rec 709 with Rec 2020, which I had forgotten to do anything about. So if we just change this to Rec 2020, nothing, I mean, we lost some saturation, but maybe that's okay. Let's just see here. Should have done this. Yeah, you can see actually we're getting some banding there, and so this is Rec 709 merged with Rec 2020, so not correct, and this is correct. Yeah, that's nice. That's so much nicer, god damn it. I gotta update this for the final shot. So yeah, that's how this shot was created. Please leave a comment if there are some specific things about this you have any questions about, and I'll try to get back to you, or, you know, create another video. We'll see. That's how you utilize Fusion for maximum efficiency, using UV projection hacks and compositing lighting tricks and stuff like that. And I probably saved a few rendering hours. Okay, that's it for this video. Hope you found it useful. Like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.